When you don't have boundaries, you're leaving yourself unprotected, you're compromising your values and beliefs, and inevitably putting yourself in uncomfortable positions with uncomfortable outcomes. That's just not where you want to be. Hi ladies, welcome back to the Feminine Universe. I am so happy to have you here. From stop signs to state laws to employment agreements and school dress codes, there are rules and boundaries everywhere. Unfortunately, the one place we don't get taught much about boundaries is when it comes to ourselves and how we want to be interacted with. If we're lucky, we get an awesome family that teaches us the basics and we edit as necessary as we go through life. But in reality, many people don't even get that. Because of this, you end up with people who normalize bad behavior because it's all they've ever received, or people who think they don't deserve to set boundaries because they've accepted less for so long, or you get people who, after being repeatedly mistreated and run over, end up creating extreme boundaries that keep everyone away, which sacrifices connections and blessings that could have significantly enriched their lives. I don't want any of these outcomes for us. So today, we're going to cover how to set healthy boundaries that protect you, benefit you, and enrich your life. So let's get started. Firstly, what are boundaries? Healthy boundaries specifically. Well, the best definition that I've come across is healthy boundaries are the limits you place around your time, emotions, body, and mental health to stay resilient, solid, and content with who you are. They are borders you create to protect you from being used, drained, or manipulated by others. I think that sums it up so beautifully and puts it all in a nutshell. Many people lump boundaries and standards together, and though they definitely have some overlap, there is a bit of a difference. In my book, boundaries are kind of the foundation on which you can build your standards. So we're going to focus on boundaries today, and we can talk about standards and how to raise them in another video if you'd like that. Now, why are boundaries important? As we covered in the definition portion, they do keep you from being used, drained, or manipulated, but I'd like to take it a little further and say that boundaries are actually important for 3 major reasons. Yes, they 1, protect you, 2, they allow you to live by your values and beliefs, and 3, they preserve your comfort and wellness in any given situation. So when you don't have boundaries, you're actually leaving yourself unprotected, you're compromising your values and beliefs, and inevitably putting yourself in uncomfortable positions with uncomfortable outcomes. Whether that's doing things you don't want to do, being embarrassed after certain interactions or behaviors, accepting treatment that you actually find unacceptable, and so on and so forth. And that's just not where you want to be. So it's important to set boundaries in order to significantly decrease these kinds of moments and experiences in your life. Now, just before we get into how to set your personal boundaries, let's talk about and try to understand some of the reasons why people violate boundaries sometimes. Because, spoiler alert, not everyone is toxic. And going into this understanding that can help make sure your boundaries are healthy and not punitive. So the first reason many people might overstep or violate your boundaries is because they don't know your boundaries. They haven't been made clear yet, so they literally do not know that something is a boundary for you, especially if it's something less common or very specific to you. While most people don't want to be touched intimately by strangers, most are okay with things like a handshake, a cheek kiss, a high five, depending on the culture. So if you hate being touched at all, someone who reaches out to shake your hand probably isn't trying to trigger you. They're simply unaware that that's a problem for you, which leads to the second reason people violate boundaries, which is their boundaries are in a different place than yours. Especially if they don't know your boundaries, it's common for people to think or assume that your boundaries are kind of where theirs are. We're taught from a young age to do unto others what we would have them do unto us. So they think the same way you probably wouldn't like the things they wouldn't like, you might also be okay with the things they'd be okay with. So if they're okay with something like allowing an acquaintance to ask them certain questions, they may think you're okay with it as well, completely unaware that they may be overstepping or offending you. The next reason is they don't think you mind the behavior. Let's say your boss is always giving you extra work and special projects, and your friends and family are always asking you for favors. Or let's say you started off your relationship planning all the dates. Based on the way you react or the roles you typically take on in relationships, friendships, or in corporate situations, people may actually think that you like or even prefer to do certain things. Or they may think that you like to have things done a particular way, so they don't interfere with your process or offer to help, or they even continue to pile things on. And the last reason is they are actually toxic, meaning they are intentionally trying to harm, disrespect, take advantage of, or make you uncomfortable. Or they're intentionally disregarding your needs and are unwilling to change or compromise when interacting with you because they're more comfortable with their way of doing things. Whatever the reason, the toxicity will show itself if after stating your boundaries, they continue to push or overstep and make no attempts to compromise or do better. Having a better understanding of why someone may be pushing up against your boundaries is important because it can make such a huge difference in how you choose to enforce your boundaries. If you feel like something is a sincere misunderstanding, you'll probably want to address it more gently. Whereas if you determine something is being done intentionally or with malice, you'll probably want to address it more sternly, or in more extreme cases, completely cut off interactions with that person. This brings us to our next part, the main attraction. How do you create and enforce healthy boundaries? Well, while I can't tell you exactly what all your boundaries should be, because we're all comfortable with different things, I can give you a general guideline to work with, as well as how to spot things you may need to add to your list of boundaries. So to start creating these boundaries, we're going to use a little acronym I made up called APE. A is going to be for the areas of your life, P for the people in your life, and E for how you express and enforce your boundaries. So let's start with the areas, because there are a few major areas in our lives where we absolutely need to have boundaries. These include physical boundaries, which refer to your actual physical space, safety, comfort, as well as physical intimacy. It also includes your family and possessions, which are all extensions of you, from how much touch is okay during platonic conversations, to when you're comfortable with intimacy, to who can hug your kids. Then there are your emotional boundaries. This will encompass things that affect your emotional and mental well-being, things that don't make you feel good or that weigh heavy on your mind, from what kind of jokes you find hurtful to how you address attempts to gaslight or guilt trip you. Then you have your time boundaries. How much time do you need to yourself per day or per week? How much time can you spend on the phone listening to your friend who keeps breaking up and making up with the same guy? How will you address interruptions to the routine or schedule you've created for yourself? Next, you have your financial boundaries. How much money are you comfortable lending? How much are you willing to spend on a group trip or vacation or dinner? Are you comfortable talking about your income? Which leads to your privacy boundaries. What topics are off limits for you? What are you okay with your mom telling her friends? What are you okay with friends posting? In each area of life, there are different elements of privacy, and everyone's needs for privacy will differ. But being the little privacy queen that I am, I have to give privacy its own section. The next thing you want to think about is P, the people. How do you want to apply these boundaries to the different people in your life? We tend to interact differently with family than we do with strangers, with romantic partners than with coworkers. So the way we apply boundaries to them will usually be different as well. Most importantly, you need boundaries for and with yourself. Think, how much time do I need to myself? How much can I drink and still carry myself well? How much TV or social media do I take in? Next is your family. What boundaries do you have for the people who have always been there, will always be there, and would do pretty much anything for you? Of course, I mean that if that is actually your family dynamic. Then comes friends, from the new ones in your life to your ride or dies and day ones. Then comes romantic partners, acquaintances, and strangers. We must understand that not everyone needs to be in every part of our lives. When you don't have clear lines, it's an invitation for disrespect. Did he waste your time, or did you let him waste your time? Did they overstep, or did you tell them too much? Now, you don't have to figure out all your boundaries in one shot. You will continue to set them and edit them as you go along in life. With time, you might become more chill. With time, you might realize you're too chill and need a bit more structure. Sometimes you won't know you don't like something until after you've experienced it in an uncomfortable situation. Then you can add it to your list and say, next time I'm in a similar situation, I'd like it to go more like this. Lastly, let's talk about how to express and enforce your boundaries. When it comes to expressing your boundaries, you can do so directly or indirectly. Indirectly can look like making a joke. Someone asks how much money you make, you can say, wow, enough to do what I need to do. Or you can change the subject. We've all done that at some point. Or you can show them instead of telling them. If every time people start to get extremely vulgar and obscene, you leave the room or the conversation, most people will start to get it. Now, directly can look like stating your boundaries ahead of time, like, hi, welcome to the team. I really like to keep my head down and focus in the mornings, but feel free to stop by my office between noon and 2 if you ever need to talk about anything. Or you can state them in the moment, which can look like, I don't think we've gotten a chance to talk about this, but it really makes me uncomfortable to be asked about my personal family matters. Now, when it comes to enforcement, these are things that people have to deal with after breaching your boundaries. And this might be the most important part of having boundaries, because if you're unwilling to enforce them, there's no incentive to respect them. It's like having rules for your children. Without consequences, the rules become kind of pointless. So the first way you can do that is to just address the behavior. People forget sometimes. So something like, I've asked you not to raise your voice at me. You can give a warning shot. If you can't speak respectfully and stop yelling, I'm going to have to leave. You can change the perspective. Sometimes you have to put things in terms the other person understands. Like, being yelled at for me is the equivalent to how you feel about being ignored. Next, you can remove yourself. If your boundary has been expressed clearly to this person and you feel like they know what they're doing, you can simply check out of the conversation without much explanation. Well, this isn't going well. I'm going to go. You can also refer back to the boundary, then go. I see you're having difficulty understanding that yelling makes me uncomfortable, so I'm going to leave and maybe we can revisit this another time. And of course, as a final result, if pushing your boundaries keeps happening, you can cut contact completely if possible, or limit it as much as possible if you can't. There are different approaches for different situations and for whether you think the overstep was intentional or an innocent mistake. Finally, I want to leave you with a few reminders. The first one being, boundaries are for you. They're not about punishing other people, and they're also not about controlling other people. If you're uncomfortable with swearing, you can't force someone else not to swear. All you can do is share that it makes you uncomfortable, and if that person values your presence, they can then choose to swear less or not at all. And if they don't, all you can do is remove yourself from the situation or conversation, or limit your interactions with them going forward. Next reminder is that boundaries don't have to be war. Setting new boundaries might throw people off, or make them think that the way you feel about them has changed. Solving that can be as simple as reassuring them that you care and sharing that you've just discovered something that works better for you or that makes you happier, and that they should let you know if they discover boundaries or changes that make them happier as well. Two-way street. Next reminder is to be reasonable. If you don't like being touched and someone brushes against your arm on a crowded subway during rush hour, you have to understand the situation, be reasonable, and compromise in that moment, or start looking into other modes of transportation. Next, don't ask for what you aren't willing to give. Don't say you need and value your privacy, but yet you're always the one with 21 questions about everyone else's life. And my last reminder is to stick to your boundaries. We all make mistakes, we all slip up, but do everything in your power not to constantly change them or make any exceptions. If you sometimes pick up your calls after work hours and sometimes you don't, then it's always going to be worth a shot. If you sometimes turn down the Netflix and chill attempts and sometimes you give in, then it's always going to be worth a shot. The behaviors won't stop. People can't respect your boundaries if you don't. And that is my introductory overview on boundaries. I hope it gave you some things to think about and build upon. Depending on where you are in your journey, you may feel like you have a very challenging task ahead of you. But always remember, you can always tackle things a little bit at a time. Maybe you want to start setting boundaries in one area of your life, or with one particular person or group of people, and then add on from there. You can do this. Your future self will thank you. So let's set those healthy boundaries, feel good about our decisions, and get the respect we deserve, and have healthy relationships in every area of our lives. Let me know if you want to see more on raising your standards, and I can do that as well. Until next time, ladies, stay feminine, stay focused, and have fun.